Okay, here's today's talk is about adult learning. I also talk about Bloom's taxonomy a little bit at the end of the presentation as well. So it's mostly about the adult learning. And I have to say that I'm probably the worst person to make this presentation because I have a biased perspective, because I always have to ask this question. Adult learners learn best if, and you fill in that blank, but then you have to add the caveat, but not children. And that's the problem that I've always had with adult learning, is that almost always, whatever the theory is, when you say adult learners learn best with, and you tell me what it is and fill in that blank, it almost always is also true of children. When is someone an adult learner is also something that you struggle with. The best definition that I've heard is that you're not really an adult learner, even though you might be legally an adult. You might be 18, you might be 21, whatever the legal definition, wherever you are for adult might mean. You're not really an adult learner until you have some real-world life experiences that you can bring to the table. And so for some people, they bring them to the table when they're 18. For others, they don't bring them to the table until they're 30. So you're not an adult learner until you bring life experiences to the classroom. Okay? All right, adult learners. What are some of the things that we know about adult learners? Adults bring a great deal of life experience to the classroom. And that's the definition of what an adult learner is that they have a great deal of life experience that they bring to the classroom. And you can make use of that in the classroom, or you ought to make use of that. Learning needs to be tied to life changes. Often when we're working with adult learners, we're working with them because there's been a death, there's been a divorce, there's been a job change, there's been some kind of a life-changing event that requires them to retool and relearn things. So often there's some sort of life change that's going on. Learners need to see immediate application of learning. They need to understand how what they're learning can be made use of in their whatever they're going to educational, whatever context that they're going to that they're using that course for. They tend to be internal and self-directed learners, and they also tend to have a good self-concept. So these are self-directed and good self-concept are two key motivational factors. And another key motivational factor is that almost always adult learners are taking a class because they're choosing to take that class. It's not compulsory like K-12 schools. Although there are training events that adults have to go through that are also compulsory. So those are some of the key elements of characteristics of adult learners. Some of those I could say are true of children as well, but not life experience, for example. But these are the ways we characterize adult learners. Okay, so what are some of the theories? Well, there's action learning, there's experiential learning, there's project-based learning, there's self-directed learning. Interestingly, in the ebook that you're reading, project-based learning and self-directed learning aren't being taught as adult learning theories. They're being taught as learning theories, and so they're not a separate chapter on those. Whereas experiential learning and action learning is a part of the adult learning chapter that you've just read, and experiential learning is talked about, but there's a separate chapter on experiential learning. But both of these are very much related to constructionism and project-based learning. So as you get to the point where you're actually making, these tend to be much more instructional in nature. They talk about what you do to create a learning environment for adults. And as you look at those, often those things will work. Once you get to that level of analysis, will work with children just as well as it will with adults. All right, action learning. Work on a real project or problem. Work in groups, learn how to learn. Well, that's pretty much what project-based learning or problem-based learning is all about. And that's also what cooperative learning and information processing is all about. So I think action learning is an interesting construct, but I think that, again, I think that it works across all levels. And again, I think that the key difference is that adults bring to the table, they bring to the project, they bring to the problem a wealth of life experience that you might not otherwise have. So I think a great example is that as a teacher, I teach undergraduates about using computers in the classroom, and I teach teachers how to use computers in the classroom. And a really difference, a big difference between those two classes is the undergraduate students are much more comfortable with the computers and they're willing to do all kinds of things with the computers, but they have no clue what a classroom's like. So I have to spend most of my time and energy in bringing real-life examples to the classroom to help them understand how they can make use of the computers. When I teach the adult learners, the ones who bring the wealth of experience to the classroom, the teachers, they all have much more extensive experience in the classroom, much more extensive knowledge and experience that they can tie things to, but they're a little less willing to take chances with computers, and so that kind of encapsulates the differences between those two populations. Okay. Experiential learning, it's holistic, intrinsic motivation, learning by doing. Well, that also is Vygotsky, motivation, Dewey, and constructionism. So again, I'm beating a dead horse here by talking about the fact that adult learning theories are called adult learning theories, but they actually work regardless of whether it's adult learners or not adult learners. And here's project-based learning, the same thing. Self-directed learning, same thing. Adults versus children are good versus bad learning, active learning versus passive learning, relevant learning versus irrelevant learning, intrinsic learning versus extrinsic learning, self-directed learning versus do what I tell you to do. I think the bottom line is that I think the better construct is good versus bad, and probably the key factors in distinguishing between adult learning and non-adult learners is that adult learners bring a wealth of experience, and they're almost always engaging in the learning experience because they're choosing to do it. It's not compulsory. All right, let's talk about Benjamin Bloom. His Bloom's cognitive taxonomy has been modified. It got modified in 2003, and so the new terms are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And really, I think that probably Bloom has become more relevant today than he ever has, particularly with the advent of online learning. And so here's a little portion of one of my online classes, and so I have read a book. Well, read about problem-based learning. Well, that's remembering, and maybe to some extent understanding. And then watch this anchored instruction streaming video. That's still at the remembering and understanding level. Now take a quiz. Well, that's still remembering or assignment. Now go to the assignments link and submit a PowerPoint slide. And in that PowerPoint slide, they're attempting to apply the theory to a specific context, which might also get them in a situation where they're analyzing their own teaching experience and making use of that. So applying and analyzing might be where you're at with that one. And then I have my lecture, which is these set of PowerPoint slides that you're watching now. You might also engage in the process of designing a lesson plan, and then you're in the process of perhaps evaluating and creating. So I think you can make use of Bloom in online learning in way. It really is a nice construct because you really want to get down to that creating level. And unfortunately, I think what a lot of people do is they just want to get in there and make tutorials or give people tutorials or give them readings, and it's really at the remembering and understanding level. And I think that the most powerful way of making use of online learning is really digging down to that creative or creating or evaluating level and getting your learners engaged in that process. Okay? So there's a little bit about adult learning theory and also about Benjamin Bloom.